Grüezi, hallo, servus und g'day. Yes, it's been a while. It's been a few months, actually, since I got back from Australia and put up my last episode. Many things have happened. The job that I went to Australia to try and meet the director on, that job didn't happen in Australia, as I mentioned. Lo and behold, 2 weeks after I got back to Switzerland, the job came through and I did it remotely. So there you go. Wasn't a wasted trip, of course, because I saw family and friends, which was fantastic. Now, I'm trying out a couple of new mics. So bear with me on that, and if you have a preference, if anything sounds better or worse, then let me know in the comments. Otherwise, aside from that job, which is Boy Swallows Universe, that is being shot in Queensland in Australia. It's in production at the moment, and so it'll come out sometime next year, hopefully. What else? Yes, I did a job for a friend, colleague of mine who is in Zurich. His name is Rudolph, and he runs a production company called Playground Media, and he's starting a podcast of his own. So what I've done is capture the 2 sketches that I did for him and the final drawing. So that's something that I did about a month ago, and put it together as a unit. I'm yet to finish editing that, and that's what this introduction is for. So I hope you enjoy it. I'll explain more as the drawing goes on, and I'll see you on the other side of that. Excellent. Bye. And so the job that Rudolph Isler from Playground Media wanted me to do is concerning the Crystal Cave murders, which is a very old case in Switzerland. And just to get into what's being drawn here, this is the concept that we came up with. Rudy wanted to see from within a cave, looking out, with crystals in the foreground and blood coming from the crystals, with an ominous figure in the opening, in the entranceway to the cave. So this is my first rough, and as you can see, it's pretty fast, pretty sketchy, but that's all it needs to be to give an indication, just to show Rudy that I'm on the right path. So just doing the opening to the cave there, and some rough areas for where I'm going to shade. So all the elements, getting them in there. The bloke standing in the entranceway, in the opening to the cave, the blood on the crystals. Of course, this is not actually what happened. There was no blood on crystals, but there certainly was on the girls who were found nearby. It was 40 odd years ago now, and Rudy's podcast is basically investigating what might have happened. They never found the killer, and so of course it remains a mystery. But there are people in the village who remember it, and it was highly renowned, highly known in Switzerland at the time. So that's sketch 1. And then I moved directly into sketch 2. I think I can already see here what I want to change for the second sketch. And so for the second sketch, I wanted to create a little more interest around the shape of the opening itself. I thought then that it might be good to pull the crystal shapes right into the foreground and make something of the corner. Use the whole page, as we say in drawing, teaching exercises. Use the whole page. And so a little more detail, giving some depth and pushing the background further away, and a little more ominous of a stance on our unknown figure. The girls were found nearby the entrance to the cave, and the reason why it was such a big deal for the locals is that only a local themselves would know how to navigate around this area of terrain in the foothills of the mountains. It happens to be very near where we live, in fact, just about an hour away. I think the town is called Oberriet, and the crystal caves are in fact a place of many school excursions. So very popular, very well-known area, and so it hit the community pretty hard. So now clearly I'm getting bolder here with the layout, and I much prefer this. I think you could tell why. Much stronger composition, juxtaposing shapes, the negative space in the black for the shading, and of course the guy in the cave opening there has got a much better stance, just by hunching his shoulders a little and bringing his head down. And more of a monotone for the trees in the background. So that's sketch 2. Now moving into the final composition, Rudy had sent me this image of crystals which he really liked. And so I basically used that, traced over it, simplified it, of course, because the myriad of crystals in that cluster is way too complex for what will ostensibly be a thumbnail album cover for Rudy's podcast. I'll let you know in another video when his podcast is released. I think he wants to put this image out with previews, trailers, so to speak, for his podcast. So I'm simplifying and blocking here the crystals, just marking out areas of shade, areas of highlight. All the while, I tend to use, well, as you know, a lot of layers. It means that you can work over things without having destroyed the previous version. And this is just a little exercise in simplifying that down as a shape. So compositionally, I think that's working pretty well. And even more of an extension in detail of the mouth of the cave. This time I'm adding more depth within the body of the cave itself. I think that the rocks on the left here are giving it more of a tunnel feel. And I really wanted to work on the daunting nature of this figure. These poor girls were only 14 and 15, I think, and their lonely bicycles were found abandoned near the intersection of Oberriet on the way up to the Crystal Caves, which are tucked away high in the mountains. Bit of a trek, and so nobody knows what really happened, and people in the village nearby have their own theories, have their own villains whom they think did the deed. And Rudy has been travelling from Zurich on many occasions now to chase up new leads. Somebody else has a little bit of information and he follows up on it and drives out there. He's now known as that guy from Zurich. But it's quite an enthralling case. And it may be that whoever did this is still alive and an old person in the community, assuming it's a man. Clearly had to drag these girls quite a ways up into the mountains. So here I am really trying to find the form of the crystals and give them a sense of 3 dimensions by, in my mind, literally pouring a liquid over them and trying to figure out how it would fall and run and drizzle. And of course, all the while trying to get that particular crimson that can only mean blood. And so again with another layer for the background trees. Didn't like that first attempt, so have at it once again. I'm fairly happy with that. And trying to get a sense, may look fairly random, but in each of these harsh black strokes, broad brush strokes, again trying to feel my way around the rocks and leave highlights where the light would catch. As you can see, it's a lot more detailed than the first sketch, because you can see now in those greys there on the left. Just turning that layer off to have an uninterrupted look at this silhouette of our bloke, of the evil one. Now the choice with the decision with silhouettes, I always find, is, do I leave it jet black, or do I add a thin white outline? Both of which are correct, but it just depends on the drawing. And you can see here that that thin white outline really steps things up in terms of giving a contrast. And of course the shadow coming from his feet. Now I often turn layers to 50% while I'm working on them, if I need to draw on another layer in front of that, and there it goes back. And now just going through the legwork of filling in each of these areas of shadow. The image that Rudy gave me, I didn't show it in its full 100% form, but I found it surprisingly stark in its black-white contrast. And so I'm trying to reflect that in the drawing itself, and just take all those hatch-marked areas and turn them fairly solid black, with just a few areas of glassy refraction and reflection. And this sort of thing, this legwork, like architecture, you can talk all you want about drawing one window, but then of course you have to do 100 of them if you're drawing a building, depending on the building. Mind you, the repetition is often quite meditative, and I like actually watching it as it's appearing in the drawing. Yeah, so I've gone the mid-tone there with the grey. And then back to our blood layer. And here I'm toning it, I'm just pulling a bit more black into it, realizing that I'm going to need space for the text and the title. And tightening up the straight edges of the crystal. Getting all those crystally edges crystal clean, so to speak. I'm always surprised and impressed at just how such tiny details, like a straight line on the edge of a crystal, can make such a difference. Now, I wasn't happy with the way the blood was looking, and so I went for a really bold, we'll call it a spot color really, because it's one flat color, and try and find that perfect crimson, and then offer just a little bit of shading, keeping in mind, in my imagination, the 3 dimensions of these crystals and what the shadow might look like over this viscous red blood liquid. It's very subtle. It's a tricky gig, that one. And a few final touch-ups here, making the blacks black, bringing forth the highlights, and then I add text. An investigative, a true crime podcast. The Crystal Cave Murders. So there you have it. Drawing from beginning to end. A couple of sketches there for the Crystal Cave Murders. I just wanted to show you what it's like to take a bit of a brief and then develop a feeling, develop a sense of the artwork. So I look forward to Rudy's podcast coming out. Not sure when that's going to happen. Again, like my channel, his podcast is also just straight off the bat, and he wants to get a few episodes finished and edited before releasing it to the world, so to speak. So if you like that, please let me know in the comments. I'm kind of flying blind here, just doing what I like doing. So please leave comments. Let me know what you'd like me to draw. And of course, subscribe away and hit the notification bell so you can find out when I've released another video. So until next time, many thanks. Bis bald. Tschüss.